Okay, so have you ever, like, understood every word of your favorite English show, but then when you try to actually speak, it's like you completely clam up.
Yeah.
It's a super common frustration, right? And today we're going to use this deep dive to kind of unpack why that happens, and more importantly, to give you some actionable strategies to finally break through that speaking barrier.
Okay.
Our guide for this exploration is a YouTube video from Learn English podcast called Why I Can Understand English, but I Can't Speak.
You know what's interesting about this video is it highlights this like misconception that so many of us have that just because we can understand a language, we should automatically be able to speak it. But think about it, we passively consume so much English through media, but how much time do we actually spend like actively producing language?
Right, it's like watching someone bake a cake versus actually getting your hands messy and like trying the recipe
Yeah.
yourself. There's a difference between knowing the ingredients and actually mastering the process.
Exactly. And this is where Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis comes in. It basically suggests that we acquire language best when we're focused on communication and meaning, not on getting every grammar rule perfect.
Yeah.
So imagine your brain is like a sponge.
Okay.
The more meaningful input you give it, the faster and more naturally it'll learn.
So the first reason the video digs into for why speaking can feel so hard is, well, we're simply not speaking enough. It seems obvious, but
Yeah.
I think it's easy to overlook, especially when we're surrounded by so much passive English content.
It's true. We're almost trained to be receivers of language, not producers.
Yeah.
And when we finally do try to speak, our brains haven't had the practice to like build those neural pathways for active communication.
The video uses the analogy of speaking being like a muscle. And if you don't use it, it weakens. I like that analogy. We wouldn't expect to run a marathon without training those leg muscles.
Mm.
Speaking is similar. It needs consistent exercise. But what about those of us who do want to speak but get held back by that fear of messing up? I mean, I still remember how nervous I felt trying to order a cappuccino in Italy.
Mm.
And I consider myself to be, a pretty good English speaker.
Sure.
But it's still nerve-wracking sometimes.
That fear is a major hurdle for a lot of learners. We worry about sounding foolish or being judged, which creates this like mental block. But here's the thing. Everyone makes mistakes when learning a new language.
Right.
It's part of the process.
Even babies don't just magically start speaking in perfect sentences.
Mm-hmm.
They babble. They mispronounce words. They basically learn through trial and error.
Precisely. And that's what we need to embrace as learners. It's about shifting our focus from achieving perfection to simply communicating effectively.
Yeah.
Getting your message across is far more important than sounding like a native speaker right away.
I think that's a reassuring way to look at it. Now, the third point the video raises is about that annoying habit of translating in our heads. Instead of thinking directly in English, we get stuck trying to convert our thoughts from our native language, which just slows us down.
It really does, and it often results in sentences that, while grammatically correct, sound a bit unnatural to a native speaker's ear. The video gives a great example of how translating "how old are you" directly from some languages can end up sounding like "what is your age?", which technically conveys the same meaning, but it doesn't quite have that natural flow.
It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Hmm.
You can force it, but it's not going to be smooth or elegant.
Yeah.
So we've explored some of the core reasons why speaking can feel like a struggle, even when we understand a lot of English. But the good news is, there are ways to overcome these hurdles. Are you ready to dive into some solutions?
I am definitely ready. Let's do it.
All right, let's go. Okay, so the first solution the video offers is deceptively simple. It's just start speaking, even if it's not perfect.
Right.
I know it sounds obvious, but I think so many learners get caught up in that pursuit of flawlessness that they forget the most important thing, which is actually using the language.
Yeah, and the video also talks about like practicing without judgment. They even mention someone talking to their plants as a way to get comfortable speaking English out loud.
Right.
Which, I mean, hey, if it works, it works.
If it works, it works.
Yeah,
But are there other ways to create that kind of low-pressure practice environment?
absolutely. The key is finding a space where you feel comfortable making mistakes. Maybe that's recording yourself speaking or practicing with a close friend who's also learning English.
Yeah.
The point is to shift the focus away from perfection and towards simply getting those words flowing.
That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of getting words flowing, the video brings up this technique called shadowing. That sounds really interesting.
Shadowing is a powerful tool for developing fluency.
Okay.
Basically, what you do is you listen to a native speaker and you repeat what they say as closely as possible, mimicking their pronunciation, intonation, and even their rhythm.
So it's not just about repeating the words. We're really like embodying how they say them.
Exactly. It's like you're becoming their vocal shadow,
I like that.
you know?
That sounds like a fantastic way to train your mouth and brain to produce those English sounds more naturally.
It really is. It helps you develop a feel for that natural flow of English speech, which
Right.
can be tricky to grasp from textbooks alone. Think of it like learning a dance, you know?
Uh-huh.
You're observing the steps and then you're practicing those movements until they become ingrained.
Okay, so for our listeners who want to try this out, what are some practical ways to start shadowing?
Well, the video suggests starting with like short audio or video clips, maybe a scene from your favorite movie or a snippet from a podcast or even just a YouTube video. Choose something that you enjoy listening to because that'll make the process more engaging.
Right.
Then simply play like a short section and try to repeat it simultaneously, mimicking the speaker's tone and delivery as closely as possible.
Got it.
Even practicing for a few minutes each day can make a noticeable difference.
Okay, so we've got speaking more often and shadowing native speakers. The next solution feels a bit counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but makes sense. When you think about it, practicing speaking alone. Yeah. I can see how some people might find that a little strange, but the video really advocates for it.
It might seem odd at first, but talking to yourself is a great way to practice without the pressure of an audience. Think of it as like a rehearsal space for your spoken English.
No.
You can experiment with different sentence structures, work on pronunciation, and just get comfortable hearing yourself speak English out loud.
The video recommends things like describing your day or naming objects in your surroundings. I guess it's a way to turn those everyday moments into practice opportunities.
Exactly. And you can even take it a step further by practicing specific scenarios like ordering food at a restaurant or asking for directions. The more you can simulate those real-life conversations, the more prepared you'll feel when those situations actually arise.
So it's like building a mental toolbox of phrases and responses that you can access in different situations.
Precisely, and this leads us to another key solution the video highlights, which is learning phrases, not just isolated words. It's about understanding the power of chunks.
Chunks.
Mhm.
I'm intrigued. What are those exactly?
So chunks are essentially groups of words that commonly occur together in spoken English.
Okay.
They're like prefabricated building blocks for fluent speech.
Got it.
Instead of constructing sentences word by word, your brain can access these ready-made chunks, which makes your speech flow much more smoothly and naturally.
So it's like having shortcuts for common expressions and sentence patterns. I'm starting to see how that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and there's actually research to back this up. Studies in applied linguistics have shown that chunk learning can significantly boost fluency.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of how chunks work in practice?
Of course. So instead of just learning the word help, you could learn the phrase, can you help me with this? Or instead of just memorizing the word interested, you could practice using phrases like, I'm interested in, or that sounds interesting. These chunks just sound much more natural than stringing individual words together. And because your brain doesn't have to work as hard to construct those sentences, you can focus more on like the content of what you're saying.
That's a great point. It frees up mental space to actually think about what you want to communicate instead of getting bogged down in the mechanics of sentence structure.
Exactly. And the more you practice using these chunks, the more they'll become second nature, allowing you to express yourself more effortlessly and confidently.
It sounds like building up a library of these chunks is a key strategy for fluency, but it can still feel daunting to put yourself out there and actually speak in real-life situations.
Yeah.
What advice does the video offer for getting over that initial hurdle?
Well, the video emphasizes the importance of starting small and building confidence gradually. You know, it's tempting to jump into like complex conversations right away,
Yeah.
but starting with low pressure situations can be much more effective.
So what are some examples of those low-pressure situations?
Talking with friends or family members who are supportive of your language learning journey is a great place to start. You can also connect with other learners online. There are some fantastic apps like HelloTalk Tandem and Speaky that connect you with language partners from around the world. These apps provide a judgment-free environment to practice your speaking skills without feeling intimidated.
It's like having a built-in support system for your language learning.
Exactly. And as you gain more confidence in those low-pressure environments, you can gradually start pushing yourself to try more challenging situations.
Now, this next solution is one that I think often gets overlooked, especially when we're so focused on speaking active listening. The video really emphasizes the importance of listening as a key to improving speaking skills. Why is that?
Well, think about it. When you actively listen to native speakers, you're essentially immersing yourself in the natural rhythms and patterns of spoken English. You're absorbing valuable information about sentence structure, pronunciation, and even how to respond appropriately in different situations. It's like downloading language data directly into your brain.
It's like when you learn a new song, the more you listen to it, the easier it becomes to sing along.
That's a great analogy. And the video offers some practical tips for making your listening more active. They suggest watching podcasts or shows and pausing frequently to repeat lines, paying close attention to the intonation and rhythm.
Yep.
Even noticing subtle things like the difference in tone between "really, that's amazing" and "really, are you sure?" can make a big impact on how you express yourself.
It's about training your ear to pick up on those nuances that make spoken English sound natural and expressive.
Precisely. And the more you expose yourself to authentic spoken English, the more those patterns will become ingrained in your subconscious, making it easier to produce them yourself when you speak. It's like training your brain to think in English.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, speaking more, shadowing native speakers, practicing alone, learning phrases, instead of just words, starting small and embracing active listening. But there's one final solution the video emphasizes that I think is absolutely crucial: embracing mistakes as opportunities for growth.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. It's so easy to get discouraged when we make mistakes, but it's important to remember that they're an essential part of the learning process. They're proof that you're pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone and trying new things. As the video says, confidence comes not from being perfect, but from trying anyway. It's a powerful reminder that progress is more important than perfection.
I love that quote. It's so easy to get caught up in that fear of making mistakes, but reframing them as learning experiences can be so empowering.
Absolutely. And when you can shift your mindset from fearing mistakes to embracing them as opportunities for growth, speaking English becomes much less daunting. Remember, the ultimate goal is to communicate effectively, not to speak perfectly. And people are usually much more forgiving than we give them credit for. They care more about understanding your message than judging your grammar.
It's about focusing on connecting with others and sharing your ideas, rather than obsessing over every little detail.
Exactly. And that brings us to the heart of what this video is all about, helping you find your voice and express yourself confidently in English. Are you ready to explore some key phrases from the video that can help you on this journey?
Yeah, I'm ready. I always find it helpful to kind of like break down some of those key phrases and vocabulary that come up in these discussions. It helps solidify the concepts in my mind.
That's a great approach. Language learning is all about connecting those dots and making the knowledge stick. One phrase the video uses that I find particularly helpful is "speak up." Now, it might seem straightforward at first, but it goes beyond just talking louder. It's really about expressing yourself with clarity and confidence, ensuring your voice and ideas are heard.
I like that it's about owning your voice and not being afraid to let it be heard. Another phrase that resonated with me was "get stuck." We've all experienced that feeling of like hitting a mental roadblock, when we can't quite find the words or express what we want to say. It can be so frustrating.
Absolutely. And the video reminds us that getting stuck is a normal part of the learning process. Don't let it derail. You take a deep breath. Maybe try rephrasing. Or don't be afraid to ask for help if needed. The important thing is to keep that communication flowing.
Sometimes just acknowledging that you're stuck can help loosen that mental block. The video also talks about picking up a language, which I think beautifully captures that organic nature of how we often learn languages, especially outside of formal settings.
It's like how children acquire their first language by simply being immersed in the environment and absorbing the language around them. Picking up a language suggests that natural process of learning through exposure and interaction rather than just memorizing rules from a textbook.
It's about engaging with the language in a way that feels natural and intuitive. Another phrase that stood out to me was "get the message across." This one really highlights that the ultimate goal of speaking is to communicate effectively, not to sound like a perfect grammar robot.
Exactly. Sometimes we get so caught up in trying to get every grammar detail perfect that we lose sight of the bigger picture. It's about prioritizing clear communication and ensuring your message is understood, even if it's not delivered with flawless grammar.
And finally, I love how the video encourages us to step out of our comfort zone. That's where real growth happens, right? Whether it's trying a new speaking activity, joining a conversation group, or simply striking up a conversation with someone new. Those moments of stepping outside of our comfort zones are what ultimately lead to fluency.
I couldn't agree more. Embracing those moments of challenge and pushing ourselves beyond our perceived limitations is essential for language learning and for personal growth in general.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway is that speaking English confidently is a journey, not a destination. It's about embracing those challenges, celebrating those small victories, and never losing sight of that desire to connect and communicate with others. What a fantastic reminder that anyone can achieve fluency with the right mindset and consistent effort. What a great deep dive.
Absolutely, don't let fear hold you back. Embrace the process, experiment with these techniques, and remember to be patient with yourself. Fluency is a skill that develops over time, not overnight.
And before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question. The video poses. Think about a real-life situation where you'd like to speak English more confidently. What's one small step you can take this week to practice for that situation? It could be anything from shadowing a short video clip to practicing ordering your coffee in English. Remember, every little step counts.
That's a great challenge. Remember, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Keep practicing, keep learning, and never stop exploring the wonderful world of English.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive. Until next time, happy language learning, everyone.